Welcome back in. Today we're going to dive into Bitcoin hitting all-time highs over the weekend. It is going to be a big show. You guys don't want to miss it. Let's just jump right into it. I want to lead off with a couple of things that have been happening over the weekend. As you guys may have seen my tweet, TradFi was sleeping on Bitcoin as it blasted through 125. We saw this along with gold hitting all-time high. We had 80 billion worth of crypto shorts liquidated, and of course Bitcoin surpassing 2.5 trillion in market cap. All this while the government shutdown is in fact going on. And remember, people are still looking now, is Bitcoin being considered as the asset to kind of hold through all of this? All right, so I want to jump to a tweet real quick. This, of course, is Sailor not buying any Bitcoin last week. But at that point, we still are seeing all-time high. This is a very bullish signal. And the point behind this, guys, is that there is a lot of support in the community in general. Many people would say, well, hey, Paul, it's the ETFs, or we're starting to see retail started to playing into this. So all of this could really start to get very heated. And it's not just Bitcoin. You also have what's going on with silver. The issue, and we had Andy Sheckman on the show, go check that video out, talking about this very issue. And the topic was that silver is going to get wiped out. The reason is simply because of the shortages. It doesn't mean wiped out in terms of price. It means that wiped out in terms of availability. We're starting to see a squeeze, and it's also happening in Canada, Australia, and the UK after the Japanese and the Chinese have started to already file shortages on silver. You guys also know that we have this issue coming on right here. If you look at the silver ETF, borrowing fees have actually surpassed that. Now it's like 8.5%, and that's with 0 shares available. So right now you can't even go in and short this. And I think this is a factor that we are going to see in the markets right now around all assets, especially in some of these commodities. Gold has already continued to edge up on its all-time high. No gold for sale on some of these available sites that ship physical gold. 85% of silver is gone as well. So this is going to continue to put a lot of pressure on the markets going up. The problem that we're going to see with this currently is, of course, what's happening with government shutdown. Here's Polymarket, just to look at the shutdown numbers and data, edging up around, what is that, guys? That's almost 90%, 85%, laying into the probability of going all the way into mid-October. If that is the case, will we continue to see flight of capital coming in to these risk markets like Bitcoin? I think yes, Bitcoin could easily get into the 130 range. I'm still questioning whether or not we will see all-time highs by end of year. I've got a Tom Lee clip for you guys to kind of break that down because there are some things happening there as well. While all of that is happening, you have to look at some other things that are going on in the markets, because typically what happens when we see Bitcoin at these rates, Ethereum starting to crack 46, going to 4,700, most of the time we have altcoins and meme coins starting to move. If you consider this story right here, Bitcoin crushing top meme coins, if you take a look at the current performance of Dogecoin, Shiba, and Pepe, you've got a 20% year-to-date loss on Doge, Shiba and Pepe, respectively, at 41 and 48% down, and in comparison to Bitcoin. If there is one thing that could start to move the meme coin market, it is most likely getting one of their major meme coin queens out there, and that, of course, is Holmes. She's getting ready to launch meme coin. If we do see that, maybe there is a revival possibility here for meme coins, even though that is not something that you guys know that I invest in very much. But it's something to consider here in terms of how this may play out for the meme coin markets in general. This was an interesting one. And this is really talking about the all-time highs that we saw with Bitcoin. Obviously, ETFs went wild last week. We had 3.3 billion in a week, 24 billion for the year. And it's also notable that IBIT and also ETH both had 10 billion for a month. This is ranking 3rd and 4th overall, so 60 billion lifetime. These are very, very bullish signals. However, can this last is the real question. If you look at this lead up to it, this I think answers that question, which is where tokenization could kick in. Look at the notice here. Let me kind of zoom in on this for you guys right here. You'll notice here 2020 is pretty much a flat between 2011 and 2020. And then you have this explosion up in terms of annual ETF launches, and we have still not seen this around tokenization. Once tokenization kicks in, this is where I start to think that might continue to elongate not only the ETF market, but also some of the things that are happening within it. All right, let's jump into xStocks real quick because this is a 1 billion on-chain transaction volume, 33 unique on-chain holders. So this, of course, gets into a lot of really, I think, the issue that we've seen so far on at least tokenized stocks is the ability to kind of go across chain. That I think is getting ready to happen. Could we see $1 trillion activity in terms of volume? I think it's not far away. And this, of course, is going to get led out there by Solana. Speaking of Solana and Ethereum, I want to go to a clip real quick because this is Tom Lee kind of breaking down maybe what is going to happen in the market next. Take a look.
Frank, I think there's two underlying fundamental drivers for the economy. One is that we know there's a tremendous capex tailwind from AI, and the Fed's dovish. So that's the rest of the economy getting basically a lifeline. Those are going to be powerful tailwinds that even a government shutdown doesn't really change the story around. And now that we're in the seasonally strong fourth quarter, and valuations, I just don't think are that demanding because, NVIDIA is still at 26 times earnings. I mean, I think stocks still have a lot of upside into year end.
Your word's dovish, and you're dovish because the Fed didn't get the jobs report and might not get other reports. Why are you dovish, or you think the Fed's dovish, despite that critical information?
A shutdown makes people nervous, and so the Fed will have to be even more dovish, and I think that's why stocks can rally even more than they have already.
And I think that's where we are right now. And of course, we had Data Dash on last week. We were talking about this could actually extend. There could be a low time here, though, between now and the end of the year. Remember, Data Dash was calling for an all-time high in Bitcoin in October. And if that leans into that October 15th date range for the government shutdown, maybe the timing is interesting here where we start to see a pullback come in. Let me know what you guys think, because I think that is a factor that we're going to have to consider going forward. All right, so let me go to this story right here because this is a good one. It's getting into the whole idea behind Ethereum. This, of course, is where BitMine comes into this being Tom Lee, which is now pretty much the alpha investor on Wall Street. But you look at this, they're now swelling up to 2.83 million in ETH. This is after accumulating another 821 million in ETH just last week. This could get interesting for Ethereum, and I think Ethereum's all-time high is knocking at the door. The real question is how and if Ethereum can break out for maybe a 10K ETH. And remember, Tom Lee is still calling for a 12 to 15K ETH by year end, so a lot of activity. Robinhood has indicated a possible problem right now, and that starts to showcase across a lot of different things, including even Coinbase. We'll probably see it with Gemini and others. This is a factor that starts to showcase a lot of heated and frothy tops, guys. So be cautious on this. In many cases, taking a little bit of profit is not a bad thing when we start to see these all-time highs. So just be aware. These are the kind of things that are happening in the market right now. And I think this is a factor you have to consider as we start to see these all-time highs really start to kick. Now, Solana is another situation that we have to consider because Solana is yet to truly make its break. ETH will most likely be on the move to an all-time high. Likelihood, if we get continued at least some liquidity in the altcoin market, this is where I think Solana starts to get its big week. Now, the catalyst for that is what I'm going to show you guys right now, and it is all centered around the Solana ETF. If you take a look at this right here, the deadline for the Sol ETF is 4 days away. Now, granted, I know the SEC is out right now with government shutdown. There are a lot of triggers that could play into this. You got Canary Capital with their XRP, their Litecoin, and also the Solana. Remember, Grayscale, Bitwise, and 21 Shares also has a Dogecoin ETF. All of these are set up in October. The key, though, of course, could Solana be the first one that really gets the break going? One other point that I want to hit on is other top 15 projects out there. Another one, of course, one of our channel partners, which is Sui Network. One that we've continued to see within that is a little DEX called Bluefin. And you guys have heard us talk about this, but the Bluefin token has got a buyback program that's going on right now. If you take a look at the dashboard, take a look at this right here. This is the Bluefin buyback dashboard, and you can kind of see from October 1st, the green bars is the buyback amount. continuing to rise as we see this. This is good and bullish, I think, for SWE. And of course, we've seen SWE perform very well, even against some of the other altcoins, including Solana and Ethereum. All right, so when you consider ETH, SWE, and Solana, you've got to consider what is some of the alternatives out there. Arbitrum is one that we've showed on the network here quite a bit. 3 reasons that we're going to continue to see Arbitrum fly. Of course, we've got a 30% breakout right here, but a 4 billion TVL. And I think this is a big factor as we start to see this. Arbitrum has been able to do this without the Robinhood tokenization component. That, if that starts to occur, timing wise, with ETH hitting all-time high, keep a look and a watch on Arbitrum. And you can kind of see their TVL right now, DeFi Llama, continuing to grow really since, what was this, back in April where we had that low, to where we are right now at all-time highs, guys. So take a look at this kind of activity right here on Arbitrum, and I think it's still just the beginning point. So a lot of very cool issues that are happening with the ETH ecosystem in general. All right, so one other thing that signifies usually a top is when we start to see a little bit of NFT action. Bored Ape, of course, the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Well, we're starting to see some movement here, because remember that Bored Apes is one that has been in trouble for a little bit, but now the judge has ruled that, guess what? NFTs are not security. You can kind of zoom in right there. Federal judge has thrown out a lawsuit against Yuga Labs. This is the creator of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. You guys know them. The NFT collections, ruling that the token does not qualify as a security. This is huge for NFTs in general. And I think as we start to see all of this really start to fly in terms of high markets with what we're seeing in the major crypto markets, this could be good for them in general. Let's go over and take a look at silver. This is the breakout point right now where silver's starting to get, and this is what Andy and I have talked about and what we've been kind of harping on. If you haven't watched our silver videos, go back and look at that. A couple of metrics that I want to showcase here. It's hitting over $44 trading today. Look at the metrics right here in terms of sentiment. This is exploding right now on volume sentiment. And if you consider silver, you got to also take a look at gold. Getting ready to break 4,000. We kind of mentioned this last week. And again, very high activity in terms of overall trade volume, exploding right now in general. That all in line with what's happening with the S&P 500, also breaking 6,700. Everything is overheated right now. And I know a lot of people would start to say, well, if everything is so overheated, Paul, why would we buy into this market going forward? Here's my positioning right now. Looking at Bitcoin right here, tapping 125.5 again today on Monday. If you take a look at where ETH is, which is holding at 4,700 on a big green candle, also starting to put pressure on this buy zone right here, which has been around 4,700. This next move for ETH could be a huge signal, even though we got a little money flow coming out. Huge signal going into the next layer. Taking a look at XRP, a little bit sideways there. Obviously, Solana, I think, is the one to watch. This is the one that we've been talking about for some time, of being possibly the one to go with in this next few weeks as we start to go into all-time highs. Again, Avalanche is still a play that we're looking at. There is so much happening this week in crypto. You guys cannot not be part of it. So the way that you do that is, of course, become part of it by joining the Diamond Circle. Click that link down below. It's going to get you into our free club. Essentially, that is my own email that comes out to you every week. It calls highs. It calls some of the tokens that we're moving on. It also gives you some strategy that we're moving in terms of the market that is a broader picture. So make sure and join that. It's absolutely free. Catch me out there on X, at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on The Paul Barron Show. See ya.